Well, okay. Good morning. Thanks for joining in. It's nice to be back. Today we're going to talk about special relationships and the needless sacrifice that many, if not most of us, put ourselves through in the belief, the unconscious belief, that the way we are doing things is the right way. Because we do what we think is right is the reason that we teach our children, our friends, everybody of today, some of the same things we did when we were younger. And yeah, there's a lot of things we teach them differently than what we did, but there's a lot that we teach that's the same. But before I go any further, I have to explain what is known as the special relationship. The special relationship takes two forms: the special love relationship and the special hate relationship. You know the two types of relationships that we all have. We have special love relationships with those with whom we have a love interest or are loving towards. Those are the seemingly good relationships. Then we have other relationships that are filled with hate and anger, frustration, name calling, sticks and stones, breaking of bones, jealousy, bitterness, and so on. Those are the special hate relationships. Now, for most of us, the special love and hate relationship occurs within the same relationship, like in a marriage, or even between two siblings or two friends. Here we have hit the jackpot, since we are able to love and hate the same person without having to go very far. Isn't that a wonderful idea? How lucky are we when that happens, as all of our lessons are in one container, the other person, who is thinking the same thing about you. Now, just as judgment always relies on the past, that is, we can't judge anyone without the past being part of the equation. Similarly, the special relationship cannot exist without two or more people being involved. So we think. In reality, we develop a love-hate relationship with ourselves and project it onto others, usually those close to us, thereby believing that it is the other person who is at fault, who is the jerk, who is wrong. Isn't that special? All right, getting back on topic. We all know what a special relationship is because we all have them, many of them. A special relationship is usually, but not limited to, two people who developed a unique bond. This bond we have with another, in a marriage for instance, often precludes others from entering into the relationship at the same level of depth. Well, you might be thinking, in a marriage, of course no one else is getting involved in this relationship. It is an exclusive relationship. And therein lies the problem: exclusivity. Now, this relationship, this special relationship, can occur within a group also, like a sports team or a musical group, not just between two people. But let's say there are two people who meet and fall in love. Why do you suppose we use the term fall in love? Why is it that we are falling? There's something already wrong, inherently wrong, with the term we use to describe the most important relationship we think at the moment in our lives. And it's used to describe our feelings, to describe this type of relationship. And yet we are totally unconscious of it. But that's not what I'm going to talk about. The reality is that we separate ourselves in our current way of living by partnering up sequentially with one other, thereby limiting the boundless love that is within us to one other person at a time. There are a few who are able to weave their way beyond this, but most do not and cannot. This way of life, this over-the-top love we feel for one other, excludes everyone else except for the special person we fall in love with. This is the basis of most relationships and the basis of all relationships in which the ego enters. For every relationship on which the ego embarks is special, and its purpose is to get something. As a comparison, God loves us all unconditionally, without equivocation, without partiality, without a change of mind. And because the divine is love, it can only give of itself. Simply love. Regarding the ego, it is impossible for the ego to enter into any relationship without stuff. Anger, for instance. Sin, guilt, and fear is the unholy trinity and the foundation upon which the ego is built. Now, we have been taught to live the fairy tale, to believe in the sanctity of the special love that comes around, so infrequently, and to grab onto it when we find it. We encourage those we know to find that someone special. Yet the only thing this method of joining does, at an unconscious level, even though most of us have never thought of it in this way, again because it's unconscious, is a result in a sense of separation. And separation brings guilt to any relationship, as separation is the source of guilt. And I'm not talking about two people separating from each other and feeling guilty about having done so. Some feel elated. We are going way back in time, before time was, when us knuckleheads chose to leave the source, the creator. That is the separation I'm referring to. From that arose guilt to a level so great that we buried it deep inside of us and now keep it stored in our unconscious mind so that we don't ever have to think about it. How can we? We're unaware of it. We are unconscious of it. But the attraction to guilt must be recognized for what it is. Yes, there is an attraction to guilt. It is something we don't want, yet never, or almost never, do we take a moment to look at it. Thus it remains buried and, in effect, treasured. It remains buried in us, in our subconscious. And since it's buried there and we don't ever take a look at it, it's got to be treasured and valued by us because we are holding on to it. It must be treasured. Otherwise, we wouldn't hold on to it. And let's face it, we do not let go of anything we value. The attraction of guilt has value to us only because we have not looked at it. Not looking at it keeps it right where it is, in the deep unconscious, the field of dreams. We have nothing to lose by looking open-eyed at ourselves. For ugliness such as this really does not belong in our holy mind. But we refuse to do that. Now, just as the Golden Rule states, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, the ego's doctrine is, what you do to others, you have escaped. Ha! Isn't that a hoot? The ego wishes no one well, yet its survival depends on our belief that we are exempt from its intentions. It counsels us, therefore, that if we are host to it, it will enable us to direct our anger outwardly toward another, thus protecting ourself. So it embarks on an endless chain of special relationships forged out of anger and dedicated to one insane belief, and that is, the more anger we invest outside of ourselves, the safer we become. Projection makes perception. Strange, isn't it? In one way or another, every relationship the ego makes is based on the idea that by sacrificing itself, it becomes bigger. The sacrifice, which it regards as purification, any Catholics out there, is actually the root of its bitter resentment. Now, the ego would prefer to attack directly, but it realizes that no one would interpret direct attack as love. And the ego wants us all to think that a special relationship is based in love. It is very interesting to note that to the ego, a relationship only means that bodies are together. It is always this that the ego demands, and it does not object where the mind goes or what it thinks, for this seems unimportant to it. As long as the body is there to receive its sacrifice, the ego is content. To the ego, the mind is private, and only the body can be shared. This goes directly contrary to all the teachings of all the philosophies out there. But the ego has its own bass-backwards philosophy. Ideas are basically of no concern to it, except as they bring the body of another closer or farther. And it is in these terms that it evaluates ideas as good or bad. What makes another guilty and holds them there is considered good by the ego. What releases them from guilt is bad. Suffering and sacrifice are the gifts with which the ego blesses all unions. And those who are united at the ego altar accept suffering and sacrifice as the price of union, seeking relief from guilt by increasing it in another through this supposed union. The other person in the relationship always seems to be attacking, whether it's in little ways or it's unconscious, perhaps it's with intent. Of course, the other person is thinking the same thing about you. The fury of those of us joined at the ego's altar far exceeds our awareness of it. We're not even aware of this. So whenever we are angry, we can be sure that we have formed a special relationship. A special relationship which the ego has blessed, for anger is its blessing. Anger takes many forms, by the way, from mild frustration to rage, but it cannot deceive those of us who have learned that love brings no guilt at all. No guilt, no anger. All anger is nothing more than an attempt to make someone feel guilty. And this attempt is the only basis the ego accepts for special relationships. But remember this, to be with a body is not communication. Yet the ego would have us be with bodies in total disregard of the mind and thoughts, deceiving us into thinking that someone else is here with us just because there is another body in the room. The union of bodies thus becomes one of the ways in which we keep our minds apart and asleep. Yet remember this too, bodies cannot forgive. They can only do as the mind directs. So as long as we believe that to be with another body is companionship, we will be compelled to keep others in their bodies, thinking the same way, believing the same thing we do. We will find safety in guilt and danger in communication. Hey, don't talk about that. That's too scary. The ego always teaches that loneliness is solved by guilt, and communication is the cause of loneliness. As insane as this sounds, many have learned it. I'm going to say that again. The ego teaches that loneliness is solved by guilt, and communication is the cause of loneliness. Forgiveness, on the other hand, lies in communication, as surely as problems lie in guilt. Spirit teaches that communication is salvation, and it is through the holy instant that what seems impossible is actually accomplished. In the holy instant, guilt holds no attraction, and communication or forgiveness is restored. And guilt, whose only purpose is to disrupt communication, no longer serves a viable function. So to appeal to guilt for salvation is to believe we are alone. That is, to feel guilty denotes aloneness. To feel as though we are all alone is to be guilty. I'm going to say that again. To appeal to guilt for salvation, I could say to appeal to guilt for forgiveness, is to believe we are alone. To feel guilty denotes aloneness or loneliness. To feel as though we are all alone is to be guilty. For to experience ourselves as alone is to deny the oneness of Source and His creation. Us. Meaning we are in reality never alone. We can never be alone if we were created by the Creator, because we are one. Because God created us and we are therefore never alone. It's only the ego that wants us to think we are alone that ultimately results in us believing we are alone. Why does this happen? Because we are programmed to listen to the voice of the ego rather than the voice for God. Many of us get into a relationship when we are young, lonely perhaps, certainly immature, and not at all understanding of what it is we want or desire in life, other than maybe to get out of the house. Or maybe we think it's because we found that true love, at the age of 19, by the way, when we are the most brilliant we will ever be, we think. Let me say this. We don't know love or what love is for a very, very, very long time, if ever, on this planet. One thing we do think we know is that when we meet that special other person, the feelings we feel are amazing, and there is no one who's going to tell us that this is not the real thing. This has to be true love. Well, sadly, as I've talked through this, it's not true love. It is special love. And since it is special love, it is of the ego. But not to fear. There is another type of relationship that comes about through the holy instant. And it is that that I will talk about next time. May the entire universe be filled with peace and joy, love and light. May everyone, especially those who have hurt us, and those who are filled with fear, be filled with peace and joy, love and light. May the light of truth overcome all darkness. May glory be to that light. Have a great day, everyone. My love to you all.